Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another college football podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Tuesday, August 5th around here. We are 18 days out from college football officially kicking off, so we got a lot to get to. We got a lot of football to get to. We definitely have a lot of things to jump into today. We're going to start talking a little bit about fall camp. There is a ton of things going on in fall camp. Obviously, still very early, as I say on there, but there is a lot of different things to break down, including a couple of quarterback battles, some worry down there in Gainesville, and Texas needing some freshmen to step up, and they are thus far. Then we got a little bit of talk around the biggest questions heading into the sport. Wanted a quick, concise way to break down all the crazy stuff that could happen this year and feel pretty good about the questions I had. Maybe we'll revisit this on Friday to get a couple more things off my chest as we get much closer to prediction season, and then we'll break down some of the teams that are looking to make their CFP debut. I have 10 teams on there, rank them 1 to 10. Not really a ranking at the end of the day, just 10 teams that stand out to me in terms of possibly making their first CFP this upcoming season. And then we'll do a little bit of a wrap up at the end with the coaches poll coming out, a couple of different things that we'll mainly get to on Friday, but wanted to talk about those very briefly before we get out of here. But let's go ahead and jump in and let's talk a little bit about fall camp. And the biggest thing to remember as we get into fall camp, even as we get into the deeper parts of fall camp, is it's still very early. All of this stuff will take shape. All of this stuff will happen kind of throughout the season. You know, whether you want to talk about the Ohio State quarterback battle, which we'll get into here in a second, an injury to the Texas offensive line, we'll get into in a second as well, and a couple other things. This will all develop over the next couple of weeks. This definitely will not be something that we know every single answer right away unless your team is absolutely perfect, and I can't find one of those teams in the country right now. So as of right now, everything is still very early. All that being said, people will tell you to curb your enthusiasm, to not buy into all the hype, to not buy into the propaganda. Enjoy yourself. This is the time of year where you get to fully believe your team is going at least 10-2 or better every single year. Enjoy it for the time being. Now, it might come crashing down once the season starts, but at the end of the day, all this stuff is very early, and fall camp in general is a zero-sum game. I've been thinking about this all day, and a couple of things that stand out to me, or a couple of things that would absolutely show me that this team is on a great path forward is if the Ohio State secondary started playing incredibly well, like lights out, because we know what's on the other side in Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Brendan Ennis, if they start playing well, you have to feel pretty good about that group. And then if the Texas offensive line starts playing lights out during practice against pass protection, you know that edge rushing group is going to be one of the best, probably the best in the entire country. You have to feel pretty confident in that offensive line. So there are a couple of examples where if you hear great things from them throughout camp, you can probably expect great things on Saturdays, but it's always kind of a zero-sum game. You never really know until that ball is kicked off on August 24th, August 23rd, August 30th, whenever your team gets going. That's when you'll really know all this stuff, but plenty of stuff to talk about. Let's go ahead and jump into the Ohio State quarterback battle. There are about two names, maybe a third if you really want to get creative and throw Tavian St. Clair in there, but at the end of the day, this is Julian Sayin versus Lincoln Kienholz up there in Columbus for that quarterback one spot. I still think Julian Sayin's going to win out, and there was the video of him being the first to show up to the hotel for fall camp. That's obviously a big win, at least among the media team. Obviously will not impact whether he's a starter or not, but does show he's kind of taken a little bit of ownership over that role and understands that if he's going to be the starter of this football team, he needs to also be the leader of this football team. Much like Will Howard was a year ago, he's going to have to step up into that role, and I think he's going to win out. I think the talent level is just undeniable. I think Lincoln Kienholz is a great option in the backup. If I'm being totally honest, he understands this offense very efficiently. Absolutely a guy that can get from read 1 to read 3 relatively quickly and get the ball out of his hands. So I don't think it's a disaster scenario if Lincoln Kienholz is out there, and we'll see how much Julian Sayin can actually separate during this time, because the reality is there is a world where they're playing Texas and they've only scored 3 points at halftime and Lincoln Kienholz comes in the game. So that'll be the bigger question to me. I think it's going to be Julian Sayin trotting out for the first time. What happens if things start to struggle early on in that Texas game? How quick is the leash? I guess when you talk about this Ohio State quarterback battle is probably the more interesting thing to me. I don't think we'll get an answer on who exactly is starting, at least from Ryan Day, until they kick off. I don't think we'll get that until they run out there with the first team, but I do expect it to be Julian Sayin, and we'll probably hear some things from the media over the next week or so that will give us a better idea of what this quarterback battle is going to be. The question to me, the bigger question is not who's going to win out for week one. It's can that person stick it out throughout the entire season, whether that's Julian Sayin or Lincoln Kienholz in the first series. Then we got to talk about the team they're playing in the first week of the season, and that's Texas. They've had a ton of freshmen show out, and we'll talk about one that very much needs to show out with a new injury that just came on board for Texas in the fall camp. But Grayson Littleton is the guy you're going to want to see talk about a lot throughout early parts of camp. First team reps at that kind of nickel star position that a lot of different teams, especially Texas, are playing with right now. Sounds like he is getting a lot of first team reps now. Don't know if he's going to be the starter there. They're rotating in a lot of different guys, including a possible Michael Taft moving down into that area, and then having Derek Williams as well as Jelani McDonald in the back end as those safeties. So there's a lot of different things they're playing around with, but Grayson Littleton will be a factor in this back end throughout the season, no doubt about that. Cade Phillips is another one that is turning heads in that kind of secondary room. Then you have Michael Terry and Dalen McCutcheon being huge players for that wide receiver room early on. I think Dalen McCutcheon's going to get on the field very consistently and kind of that slot role for Texas going into the season. And then Justice Terry, Josiah Sharma, as well as Lance Jackson are all making waves on the defensive line. I think those guys will be factors. Justice Terry kind of being played around with. Does he want to play outside, inside? Can do just about everything. Josiah Sharma showed up at 356 pounds, so he is plenty big, can play kind of that zero technique, nose tackle type position. Very, very talented kid. And then Lance Jackson kind of running with the twos and the threes right now, but a very, very talented guy off the edge that just adds to a room that's outright ridiculous right about now. So we'll see how much those guys really factor in. The biggest question for Texas right now is Andre Kojo, one of the guys competing for that right tackle spot right next to Brandon Baker, has gone down for the season. Sounds like he tore his ACL a couple of days ago. He will not play this entire season. So it's Brandon Baker's job at the right tackle position. Trevor Gooseby is going to be holding down the left tackle for them, but they're going to need Brandon Baker to be ready because they do not have a lot of depth at the tackle position. They have talented kids, there's no doubt about that, and the guy that needs to step up the most is going to be Nick Brooks, this talented freshman that comes out of Grayson, Georgia, really, really talented kid. He's going to have to be ready to roll because one play and you are in there starting as a freshman against Ohio State. So they got to be prepared at that position. Obviously, a huge blow to that team. It's going to be really interesting to watch that develop. Biggest thing here is Brandon Baker has to stay healthy. Trevor Gooseby has to stay healthy because if one of those guys goes down, then you have a very different conversation around this Texas offensive line in the hurry. DJ Lagway has shown back up at practice, but they don't feel overly confident as of right now, at least what's coming out from the reporters around Florida. We'll obviously get a better idea on this throughout this week and then going into next week, but he's throwing the football again at the very least. There are some reports that he has a little bit of a calf strain. If you've watched the NBA over the last couple of years, you understand that is a precursor to a much worse injury with a torn Achilles. Now, obviously hoping that will not happen for DJ Lagway. Don't know what the plan is for him going into the season. Will he just not play really the rest of the fall camp and then they throw him in there at LIU? Do they not play him against LIU to give him even more time off, knowing that Harrison Bailey can likely get the job done in that game and then bring him for USF? There's a lot of different questions here, but the reality is Lagway's health continues to be a question for this Florida team. If he's not on the football field, I think we all know what's about to happen. I think the bottom's going to fall out pretty quickly for this offense and then for this team, and then Billy Napier is going to follow pretty quickly. So there's going to be a lot riding on number two's shoulders as they head into this season, and a calf strain is the last thing you want to hear if you're a Florida fan. Obviously, still a lot to happen there, still a couple of weeks before they have to get really underway, but as we talked about last time when we were talking about DJ Lagway's injury, this kid needs to practice. There's no doubt about that. And if he's not on the field, it's going to be a lot harder to get this guy up to speed the way you want him to and reach the potential that this team absolutely can reach in 2025. But this is a troubling development. There's no doubt about that. We'll see how they kind of play this out. I like to think he will be on the field in week 1 against LIU, but at the end of the day, this is a very, very dangerous injury and could turn into something that really torpedoes Florida season in a hurry. Going over to Tennessee, Joey Aguilar seems to be coming along in that offense. They went a little bit viral with a supposed blurring out of the quarterback on an interception a couple of days ago. Didn't end up being the quarterback. Don't know why that guy was blurred out. But at the end of the day, there were a lot of different things coming out of Tennessee camp. It looks like Joey Aguilar is doing enough to win that job. It looks like he is the guy that's kind of leading the way right now among those quarterbacks. Another situation where I don't think the leash is going to be very long. I just think in general, with a guy coming in that late, learning the offense still, and playing a style of football that is a little bit turnover prone at time, or at least has been in his past, if they go against Syracuse and the thing doesn't get off to the best start, does Jake Merklinger come into the game? Does George McIntyre come into the game and play a little bit more than some Tennessee fans think that he will right now? I think it'll be Joey Aguilar. I think he will play good enough football to keep this job. I can't promise it'll be beautiful football all the way throughout the year, but seems to be coming along nicely throughout camp. They seem to be happy with the investment they put in there. Tennessee does need wide receivers, though. They absolutely need guys around that can make some big-time plays. Mike Matthews just has to be the option here. He has to be the guy that breaks through, a former five-star that was as good as it gets in his class when he came out, and he's got to be ready to roll. There's no doubt about that. If they don't have Mike Matthews going, I don't know if they had a wide receiver that's a true difference maker. They lost Squirrel White. They lost Dante Thornton. They lost some really talented guys this past year. I think it's going to be really tough if they don't have one of those go-to guys like a Mack Matthews or someone else that steps up in that wide receiver room. But as of right now, I don't see someone that's outright a difference maker. They're going to need to find one, especially with Joey Aguilar being a little bit turnover prone at times. And then the other thing from Tennessee camp is just Boo Carter is back. He is going to be with the team this upcoming year. Obviously will be a question throughout the year. He'll have to earn the team's trust back, all of that good stuff. But at the end of the day, he's as talented as they come on this team. He will absolutely be on the field. Just got to make sure that's not a continuing theme throughout the year, and him and his teammates are on the same page as they head forward into 2025. But overall, things seem to be going as smoothly as possible for Tennessee after a very, very weird offseason. They seem to have found their footing. I think they have their quarterback. Do they have the stuff around him is probably the bigger question to me. And then Ty Simpson seems to be separating just a little bit down there in Tuscaloosa for that quarterback one job. Right now it's Austin Mack with the 2s and Keelon Russell with the 3s. I think this week will probably show us a little bit more about how they actually rank those quarterbacks. Usually like to start with the most generic 1, 2, 3 you have in fall camp and then kind of play around from there. I think Keelon Russell will likely be the backup for this team to start the year. And then I have my questions about Ty Simpson. But at the end of the day, if Ty Simpson can separate, it's massive for this Bama team. Knowing who your guy is week in and week out without question is a huge, huge plus. And it's something that they technically knew last year, but I don't think too many people were super excited about who the guy was every single week. Now, very talented quarterback, but there were moments where Jalen Milroe just did not meet the expectation of Bama fans, of Kalen DeBoer, of the Alabama program overall. So Ty Simpson separating would be huge for this team. I think he's plenty talented. I think he absolutely can take over and be a 4,000-yard passer, do some incredible thing in Kalen DeBoer's offense. Got to separate over these next 2 weeks, but it feels like he's the guy right now, and it's going to be relatively hard for him to lose that job before they play Florida State in week 1. What happens from there is probably the bigger question for Alabama fans around the country. So we'll see what happens, but Ty Simpson looks sharp right now. The wide receiver room we know is incredible. The defense is downright terrifying, so everything's shaping up pretty well for Alabama, at least thus far throughout fall camp. But it's still very early with all of this stuff. Fall camp is just really getting underway. Teams have had probably 3 or 4 practices, and then we'll really get into full swing this upcoming week where everyone's there all hours of the day. They will be ready as can be, and we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, a lot of quarterback battles that need to be decided, a couple of things that could go awry for some teams where they have some injuries like Texas just had on their offensive line. It'll be interesting to watch that develop over the next little bit, and we'll be back on Friday to talk about some of that different stuff. But let's go ahead and take our first break. When we come back, we got to talk about some questions for the 2025 season. I had quite a few things I wanted to get off my chest, so figured I'd get them into one segment with a ton of different questions to talk about right after this, so stick with us.